Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, which is brought to you by our friends over at Greta. Greta is the home of our electric watch parties, and it is our place to eat, play, and drink this summer. Make it yours as well, because summer is almost over, and once summer's over, like I said, those watch parties, they're coming, and they're going to be absolutely awesome. So make sure you head down to Greta Bar YVR. David Quadrelli, joined by Jeff Paterson. Jeff, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I haven't done this show with you for a while, and we match kind of. You've got green and gold, and I don't know if people can see, but it's an elephant. And actually, people
You've got the elephant.
Well,
I've got
the A's. Yeah, it's
right.
a perfect
People
match.
have asked me if this is an Oakland A's shirt. It's not. It was. I can tell you, it was a Banana Republic shirt bought at an outlet mall in Glendale, Arizona, the day that COVID crushed the world. I was in Glendale. The Canucks were supposed to play the Coyotes. There's supposed to be a morning skate. We were all in a holding pattern, and then we found out there wasn't going to be a morning skate, but the outlet mall across the parking lot was open, and I went shopping, and I bought a shirt with an elephant on it. So it's not an Oakland A's. It has nothing to do with the A's, but it works for this purpose because you're right. It kind of feels like a little bit of a matching ensemble here today.
Not just an elephant, a green and yellow elephant. Like,
Right.
You've got the colors. It's perfect. It looks like we planned this. Absolutely. I might need to borrow that shirt from you or go find it. Go down to Glendale and find one for myself because it would go with this hat. We've got a lot to talk about today, Jeff, aside from fashion, because obviously you can expect the best fashion takes here on Canucks Convo when Jeff Paterson joins the show. So, news of the day, Jeff. The Canucks Young Star roster has come out. The Young Stars Classic takes place this weekend in Penticton. We will be out next week. You and I are making the drive up to Penticton together for training camp. And we'll talk about that. We'll preview training camp on this show. Harmondale is in New York, so it's a part 1 camp preview today with Jeff, and then Thursday, Harmon and I will be also previewing training camp because Harmon's got some takes too, and we want to hear what he has to say about training camp as well. But Jeff, let's dive into this Young Stars Classic roster for the Vancouver Canucks. Up at forward, no real surprises, I don't think. Jonathan Lekkerimäki is expected to be the guy at this tournament, so let's start with him. Let's start with Jonathan Lekkerimäki. I think he's going to be a name that we bring up a lot this season when we talk about Canucks prospects, and a lot even on this episode as we preview training camp and the year ahead. What are you expecting to see from Jonathan Lekkerimäki at this tournament?
Well, at least he falls under the category of young in Young Stars. There are more than a few that are pushing the limits when it comes to young. And look, I've tried for years to try to figure out and ascertain, like, are there actual criteria about who can take part in this thing? We used to joke Jordan Subban, I think he played in 5 Young Stars or something like that. By the time you're in your 4th and 5th, you're no longer young, and you're probably not a star either. And he just kept showing up, and they would send him there. Look, Lekkerimäki is going to be the focus, I think, of most Canuck fans and the media. We know what this guy's all about. We've seen him do it at other levels. Now the question is, how quickly does he adapt to the North American game? Came over in the spring, got a quick look, went back. He's a goal scorer, and I would expect him to score goals in Penticton. Like, I'll be disappointed if he comes out of the weekend and hasn't shown us sort of that hallmark of the shot that he's got. But it's a question of smaller ice and, not as much time and space to operate. Not going to write him off, call him a bust if he doesn't score in Penticton. But my hunch is, when you look at that roster, that he's going to be a top liner for this Vancouver Canucks team, and he's going to get every opportunity between 5-on-5 and the power play. Now, we've seen this in the past, Dave. It's such a short weekend. It's not even a tournament. Like, I call it more of a showcase. They're not playing for anything. Manny Malhotra is going to be behind the bench for the first time, and he's coming in. You got to look at some of these guys at the summer development camp, but this is going to be, it's always a scramble from a coaching standpoint, right? You're working with a bunch of guys, most of whom will be sent home to play junior or wherever they go. There'll be a few that stay in the Canuck organization, but it's tough for Manny Malhotra to get a read on what he's got to work with. But things like the power play, you're just putting your best players out there and hoping that they work on instinct. And Lekkerimäki certainly is going to be one of the better offensive players that this group has. So, I want to see him stand out. And I don't think it's unfair to sort of put that expectation on him. This is an organization that we know, and Canucks Army certainly has done prospect countdowns. I think the Athletics have gone through theirs. as well, it gets pretty thin pretty quickly for the Vancouver Canucks when it comes to top-end, legitimate NHL prospects. And Lekkerimaki one of them. So I go into the weekend with some, and it's not putting pressure. I hope that I hope that he's not freaking out because guys on Canucks Convo are talking about 3 days before Young Stars. I would hope that he would have those expectations himself to hit the ground running, to put his best foot forward at Young Stars, and then use that as a springboard into main camp, and we'll see where it goes from there. But just with the tool kit that he's got, he's one of the guys that I think people are going to be watching closely and going to have some fairly high expectations on.
One thing I noticed, and one thing I'm going to keep a very close eye on, is that Manny Malhotra, like you said, isn't going to have much in terms of like what he's going to actually have this season. But the thing he might have is what might end up being his top line in Abbotsford this year. You've got Jonathan Lekkerimaki, you've got Max Sasson, Atu Ratu, pick your center, and then Arshdeep Bains. Like Arshdeep Bains is going to be a top line player for Abbotsford, and Jonathan Lekkerimaki should as well. So Manny Malhotra is going to have at least one of his top 6 lines, if not his top forward line there. So that's one thing that I'm going to be curious to see is how are those 3 or I guess 4 players deployed? Do we see some chemistry start to build with those guys? That's one thing that I'm really interested in as we kind of look ahead to youngsters here. Jeff, I did want to ask you about the defensive side. We're going to see Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, at this tournament. That would have been something. They send a 25-year-old, 3 24-year-olds, and then they just throw Elias Pettersson in there. But Elias Patterson, the defenseman, we're going to get a chance to see him. As we look at the defense as a whole, there's 2 names to me that stand out on this list, and that's Parker Alkos and Elias Pettersson. Parker Alkos is a late-round pick, but he's a big guy. He's physical. This is a good chance for Parker Alkos to go out and make a name for himself, as well as Elias Pettersson, who also likes to play the physical brand of hockey.
Yeah, I'm really excited about DPD, and here we go. Legitimately, we're going to have 2 Elias Petterssons at main camp, and so we are going to have to find a way to designate the 2 of them. Fortunately, they do play different positions, so that'll help. But I like a lot about this guy, and to think that he was a 3rd rounder, like I think the Canucks have unearthed a player that is going to play National Hockey League games sooner rather than later. And again, it's a question of acclimating to North America, and again, the fact that he came over late last season, so he's not coming in completely blind here. But, he's got pro size. That part's undeniable. I like the fact that he plays with an edge, and I want to see that in Penticton, like right from the first game. Like, don't let guys get to the front of the net, finish checks on the boards. Like, separate the man from the puck. Like, those are all the things that he does. And so I'm expecting to see more of that from DPD here as we go. But after Lekkerimaki, absolutely. I think he is probably next on my list of guys that I'm going to keep a close eye on. I was a little surprised, like when the roster came out, I looked at the defensemen before the forwards, in fact, and I wanted to see if Cole McWard was going to be part of the mix. We've heard Canucks management name check him through the summer months here. This is a guy that's going to have an opportunity at main camp, I think, to turn some heads, and he gets to pass go, gets to collect his 200. Well, you collect more than 200 when you're playing in professional hockey, but he was at Young Stars last year. It looks like he's graduated now to main camp. And the comparison there and the contrast is that Akito Hirose is 25 years of age. Like you joked a moment ago, Quinn Hughes turns 25 in October. Akito Hirose's older than Quinn Hughes. Like, send Quinn Hughes to Young Stars. See what he looks like. I think he'd do okay. He'd probably earn a spot at main camp. But Akito Hirose at 25, and then the Canucks have 3 24-year-olds. One of them is Max Sasson. I know we're talking about defensemen, but Sasson had 42 points in the American Hockey League last year. Arshdeep Bains, I think, had 55 points in the American Hockey League. Like, each of these teams, each of the organizations, they're at different stages. Their prospect pools are at different phases as well. And so, I don't have an issue with Arshdeep Bains or Max Sasson going to Young Stars at the age they are. But if they're there, they better stand out. Like, it stands to reason. These guys have pro years. Like, there's going to be raw rookies and guys out of the draft. The Canucks are going to have some of them as well, this year's draft class. But you've got 24 and 25-year-olds playing against 18-year-olds. Like, that's a sizable gap in terms of physical growth, just development in the game, experience, all that kind of stuff. So just getting back to the defenseman, DPD's at the top of the list. Akito Hirose. I think the reason Hirose's going, Dave, is he only played 33 games last year. And so really this isn't like punishment for him, or I don't think we read into, he's plummeted on the depth chart to the point where they think he needs, he just needs games. And I think for him, it's more about getting a little bit of rust off ahead of main camp. Has he fallen on the depth chart? Absolutely. From when he broke into the league and we all thought, this is incredible. Like, this guy's going to be, a mainstay on the Canucks for a bunch of years. It was a step back last year, without a doubt, but part of that was injuries, and he just didn't log many games. So, a little surprised. Christian Felton is a guy that they signed late last season out of the college ranks. He's 24 as well. I'm kind of curious to see what he looks like. It'll be our first chance to really see him. But in terms of the true prospects, I've got Elias Pettersson. They're high on Sawyer Mineo. He's continued to develop since his draft year and playing in a good program down in Seattle. So I would think that he'll be a guy that logs a fair number of minutes at a tournament like this one. And Kirill Kudryavtsev has shined in past years at Young Stars. Another year, more experience. I would expect that, he just quietly goes about his business, but he's a fun player to watch, and looking forward to seeing what he has in store for this week's showcase.
One of the biggest risers in Kirill Kudryavtsev on our prospect rankings over at Canucks Army. I believe Dave Hall had him at 7 on the Canucks prospect rankings. And again, this is a guy who was a later round pick, and he has really flourished since being drafted. So it'll be good. It'll be good to get a look at all these guys. And of course, we'll have all the coverage for you on CanucksArmy.com. Dave Hall will be in attendance. And like I said, J Pat and I hitting training camp. Going to be a good time. But Young Stars is first. So as we kind of transition from Young Stars to training camp, Jeff, let's get to our poll question, because we asked people about some young stars in our poll question today. This is our poll question, and it is brought to you by Mr. Lube. Out of these players, who is most likely to make the opening night roster? Arshdeep Bains, Jonathan Lekkerimäki, Cole McWard, or Max Sasson? Right now, 44.2% of voters say Jonathan Lekkerimäki, 31.6% say Arshdeep Bains, 14.7% say Cole McWard, 9.5% say Max Sasson. Jeff, I went with Arshdeep Bains here. I went with Arshdeep Bains because I was looking at what roster spot or what lineup spot these guys would be able to fill. You're not bringing in Jonathan Lekkerimäki to be a bottom 6 winger, whereas with Bains, if someone on the wing disappoints, there are some spots available on the wing. If someone disappoints and you don't really need, or you want to bump up a guy that you were projecting to be in the bottom 6 and now you have a spot in the bottom 6, like, I look at Arshdeep Bains as being a guy who could surprise and make this roster. Is it likely? No. And someone replied to this tweet and said, this question's only applicable if there's some sort of injury, which is fair. But out of these players, who's most likely to make the opening night roster? I go with Bains because I just think Lekkerimäki, unless he knocks down the door and he's ready to play top 6 minutes with Elias Pettersson, I look at it and say he has everything to gain by going down to the AHL.
Yeah, and this was a question about opening night roster, not the opening night lineup. So keep that in mind, because I just think for any of these guys, it's a big ask to leapfrog. Like, I can pencil in 12 forwards well ahead of Arshdeep Bains. Now, in the battle for the 13th forward, and if they keep 13 forwards and 8 defensemen, it's one extra forward. There's also salary cap implications here. Guys that are on, league minimum deals that may work to their advantage to make the opening night lineup. We've seen the roster gymnastics and the cap gymnastics go into setting that opening night roster. I'm kind of with you. As much as I have those high hopes for Lekkerimäki at Young Stars, it's going to get tougher as he goes here through main camp and trying to find his way. Now, if he blows the doors down, then into the preseason, that's the battle, right? And I think back to a couple of years ago with a guy like Jack Rathbone, where they just kept playing him night after night after night in the preseason. And it wasn't an indictment of his performance. It was more, look, this is an opportunity. Like, we want to see more from you. Keep playing. I'd kind of like to see Lekkerimäki follow that path, that he impresses early on and they continue to test him. And maybe in that first preseason game, it's a lineup that's not full of NHLers, but then hopefully he gets the opportunity to play a couple of games with really something that's closer to the A lineup, and we'll see where it goes from there. But saying all of that, I think he needs a year in the American Hockey League and really to assert himself. And at some point, if it all continues to go well, earn a call up there. Now, Arshdeep Bains, look, they went out, they felt the need to bolster their winger ranks this year. And so some of that is because I don't think that they felt they had enough in terms of guys pushing from below, knocking on the door to be NHL ready. Arshdeep Bains got a couple of looks last year. I still think his NHL debut was his best performance overall. And after that, there was a little bit of slippage, so some penalty problems. It didn't generate anything. But they traded Vasily Podkolzin, and that cleared one obstacle out of the way. So that's one less guy that, you have to worry about beating out for a job at training camp. But then they go out and they sign Sammy Blais to a PTO. And so a guy with NHL experience is going to be in the mix here at training camp, and he should be motivated. And he's a guy that can be a pain in the butt to play against. And, how abrasive will he be? So, look, I think all the guys on that list, it's going to be difficult. I think I probably would have voted for Cole McWard, only because the depth side, the right side, Noah Juleson is kind of slotted in there. Mark Friedman was loyal to this group last year. But again, this is an organization that's name-checked McWard, had a fine first full season down in Abbotsford last year. To me, it's possible that there's a guy that got looks with Quinn Hughes in training camp last year. I don't know what
a long look.
I don't know what their plans are for him in training camp. Again, they've added pieces on the back end that's going to make it difficult for anybody to make a meteoric rise. But I know that this organization is high on Cole McWard, and he's another guy that I'm going to sort of be locked onto at main training camp just to see if he can continue to take stride. So of your poll question there, I think they're all in tough to make the opening night lineup, but I think I probably would vote for Cole McWard.
I love it. That was our poll question. It was brought to you by Mr. Lube. Mr. Lube and Tires Change Your Oil, Change Your Wipers event is on now. Visit MrLube.com to download your coupon for a free pair of Goodyear hybrid wiper blades with any oil change for a limited time at Mr. Lube. Find them at one of their 18 locations in the Lower Mainland. All right, Jeff, let's get to our training camp preview. We want to do this at the top of the show, and then the Young Stars roster got released, so we had to visit that right away. But the training camp preview, part one, we'll call this part one of the training camp preview. We were just talking about kind of the younger guys, and I don't think we have to exhaust the conversation much more than we did for just that poll question. We kind of talked about their camp outlooks for each individual, but I'm just looking at this and saying, Canucks roster's and maybe not roster. The lineup is basically set except for two winger spots, maybe. And I think you have two clear front runners in Niels Höglander and Daniel Sprong to fill those spots. I'm looking at this, and I can't remember a year where we were looking at it not this far in advance, but where we were looking at it and we were able to say, okay, this is probably what we're going to see on opening night.
Yeah, like training camp's a necessary evil. You got to go through it. But in terms of this notion of, there's so many guys coming in and fighting for jobs and it's a wide open audition, that's just not the way it works. Not with contracts in today's NHL, not with sort of the hierarchy that you've got in terms of your depth chart. And so it's more about who fits where, but knowing the names of really the 14 forwards that are going to be vying for the 12 jobs on opening night. So, it's a question of things like third line center. Is Teddy Bluger slotted there, or is that P.S. Suter's job to start the year? I think that'll be determined at training camp and through the preseason, but that is certainly something to watch, as are the winger spots with Paterson and DeBrusk. I think we all just assume that that's the way it's going to start. Doesn't mean it's going to work, but I think on paper, at very least, that's the way it's going to start. And we know that JT Miller and Brock Boeser are in lockstep and proved last year to be, two of the best players on the Vancouver Canucks, and in Miller's case, one of the best players in the National Hockey League. So, it's funny though, and I was watching Donnie and Dolly earlier today. I also was reading an out-of-market piece. I can't remember where, but both of those outlets had Niels Höglander on the wing with JT Miller and Brock Boeser. And I don't know where that's coming from, because it's just not something that we have seen. It's not the way it worked. Höglander started lower in the lineup, worked his way up, and played primarily with Elias Pettersson until he was a healthy scratch in the playoffs a couple of times. But unless I've completely forgotten, I don't think Höglander ever played with Miller and Boeser last year. So I'm not sure why people have that one slotted in. In my mind, I think Danton Heinen is going to get that opportunity with Miller and Boeser. I'm not reporting that. I haven't had a chance to talk to Rick Tocchet yet. We haven't seen his whiteboard. But my sense is that, Höglander had a fine season last year. Is he a perfect player? No. But he's shown that he can score goals. I think you're looking at Pettersson with Höglander and DeBrusk. And then in my world, it's Danton Heinen with Brock Boeser and JT Miller. After that, I'm going to start the year with Garland and Joshua still together. nothing says that they have to stay. Like the Canucks know what they've got. And when those guys are on, absolutely, there's chemistry there. It's undeniable. But that doesn't mean that it has to be that way for 82 games. So I'm open to the idea of Dakota Joshua getting a look a little bit higher in the lineup. But Connor Garland at times can slot in higher in the lineup too. And then you get down to that fourth line. And Kiefer Sherwood, I think, is one of the fourth line wingers. And then it's a question of, who do you like? Phil DiGiuseppe? Is Nils Amon? Is the fact that he's a centerman by trade and has some penalty killing utility, does that give him a leg up on others? And then we talk about a player like Sammy Blais, who, anybody on a PTO has to come in, be motivated. Just being good generally isn't enough. Like, you've got to outperform guys that are under contract already and guys that are slotted on the depth chart. But I do think that Sammy Blais can bring an element that not a lot of guys have on this roster, and that's being a bit of a prick to play against. And, I could see a fourth line if Blais has a fine training camp in preseason, Kiefer Sherwood on one side and Sammy Blais on the other. Like, that would be a difficult fourth line to play against. So I think Rick Tocchet will experiment. We saw that last year in Victoria at training camp. That's what training camp is for. The preseason, I think you want to start to narrow it down a little bit more. It's not about just wildly throwing line combinations out there. Everything's done with purpose, and certainly in Rick Tocchet's world, it is. So, yeah, I'm kind of curious to see. I know Tocchet in one of those Canuck videos that they posted, that the coaching summit, he said, I'm not a guy that's going to bust these guys on day one. Day one of training camp is more about just kind of setting the tone. And then day two, it might get a little more intense. But it's not like we all anticipated Travis Green and the bag skate. For months, we all counted down to that first day of training camp. Rick Tocchet conducts things a little bit differently. So I think it's going to be more about a controlled environment on the first day of training camp. But also interesting to note, Dave, that there are 3 full days of on ice and then a scrimmage. And we've seen in some recent years where it's been as little as, 2 days and then a scrimmage. So there's going to be 3 full days of workouts for the Vancouver Canucks in Penticton. And then it'll all wrap up on that final Sunday with a scrimmage game. And we'll see what that looks like. And we'll be there to document it all at Canucks Army.
Jeff, with Miller and Boeser, I have 3 players in my mind that I have ahead of Nils Höglander on the hierarchy of who's going to play on that line. I have, and this is in no particular order because I'm not bothering with that, Denton Heinen, Jake DeBrusk, and Daniel Sprong. I wrote about a Canucks Army. I was there for the summer skates out at UBC, and I said, the coaches aren't putting these lines together, but I did find it a tad interesting. Don't shoot me a tad.
Has Höglander.
Yeah, it does. Daily Faceoff line combinations. They're pals over at Daily Faceoff. I'll get that changed. I'll talk to them and get that changed. But I did notice that Daniel Sprong was skating with JT Miller and Brock Boeser. Yeah. And I don't know if that was Daniel Sprong showing up on day one and saying, hey, guys, I'm going to ride with you so that this becomes a talking point, or if it was Miller and Boeser saying, hey, yeah, you just skate with us for this little scrimmage that we're doing. They did the summer skate. And I got to say, again, you don't have takeaways from the warm-up for the warm-up, but it was immediately evident how hard Daniel Sprong's shot is and how he can get it off in a hurry. And once you saw him skating and shooting out at UBC, it became evident pretty quickly why this guy was able to do what he did and score 20 goals in such limited minutes, right? Like, the fact he was able to do that all at even strength as well for a lot of his success. Daniel Sprong looks like a guy that could ride shotgun on that line. Now, that being said, I don't want to just talk about him because you do have to play both ends of the ice. And that's something that Sprong's historically struggled with in his career. He wants to get better at it, wants to be committed to it this year. Obviously, he had that phone call with Rick Tocchet, so we'll see where it goes from there. But I did find it interesting that Daniel Sprong was skating on that line at the summer skate that the players held. And I also, again, you bring up Heinen, I look at DeBrusk and say, this is a guy that as soon as the Paterson DeBrusk line, which I agree with you, I think that's what it's going to be to start. As soon as that line struggles, DeBrusk with Miller and Boeser just feels like a really nice fit.
No, I've got a lot of time for that, and I do hope, but even for a game in the preseason, the idea of Jake DeBrusk complimenting JT Miller and Brock Boeser, and look, Boeser's rounded out his game. We all know that. The 40 goals last year, talked to him out at the Jake on Monday, and he seems to be in pretty good spirits, and he knows it's a contract year for him, so he's going to be motivated. And I don't know that I'm going to predict 4 goals on opening night, but he wants to get off to another quick start, and certainly the Canucks would love that. But the speed of DeBrusk on the other side would be a nice contrast to Boeser, who it's all about hands and scoring and finishing his opportunities. DeBrusk can be a pretty versatile guy. I'm with you. Like, I've got time for that conversation. Now, what that means for Elias Pettersson kind of takes us back to a point last year where, you're wondering about legitimate scoring line mates for him. But, it's funny because a moment ago, when I kind of rattled off the way things are, like, I forgot Sprong, right? Like, I'm out of practice here. They're not all rolling off the tip of my tongue, but that was a name that I'd sort of forgotten. I wasn't out at UBC last week, so I haven't seen him with my own two eyes. But, I think you could make an argument that, look, Nils Höglander had the success that he did last year lower in the lineup. He earned the promotion, but this is a guy that has shown like he can score lower in the lineup against weaker competition in theory. So maybe you go back to that for Nils Höglander and give Daniel Sprong an opportunity to play and finish with Elias Pettersson. So Rick Tocchet appears to have way more options than he did last year. But, you say that and then you quickly forget that at this time last year, they had the services of a 39 goal scorer in
Andrei Kuzmenko.
And the hope was that Ilya Mikheyev was going to do more than he did in the second half. Now, Mikheyev had 10 goals by Christmas time. Like, he looked like he was on pace for 20-some goals, and then he just fell off the cliff there. So, yes, I think on paper the Canucks addressed some of their wing issues, but Kuzmenko was a 39-goal scorer, and I think we all thought, okay, there's going to be some regression, but in most people's mind, regression would have been 25 goals, and what do you have, 7 here, and then they traded him away. So, let's see how it all plays out here, but without a doubt, the signing of DeBrusk was done with Elias Pettersson in mind. That's all summer talk, though. Like, we're getting into crunch time now, right? Like, you can't force chemistry. And for whatever reason, Pettersson, when I was on, maybe the last time I was on with you and Harm asked me, like, training camp, like, who's going to be the guy you're watching? I said, Elias Pettersson, because I want to see him hit the ground running. And we didn't get a chance to talk to him out at the golf tournament, but he was there. He's been in town. He's been skating a little bit, and they're going to skate here this week at Rogers Arena behind closed doors. So I don't know that we're going to have a whole lot of access to what's going on with the big league team. And then the prospects obviously will make their way to Penticton. But, training camp's great because there usually is one or two guys that maybe is off the radar that gets an opportunity. Like last year, Höglander and Podkolzin right from day one were the wingers on those top two lines, and that kind of surprised us all. Didn't last all that long. Training camp went by in a hurry, and even though people have tried to forget, they opened the preseason with a 10-0 loss in Calgary. The preseason can only get better this time around, at least night number one. But we're not that far away, actually, from preseason games and starting to get some of the answers to the questions that we're throwing around here today. So, I'm kind of curious. One guy that we glossed over a little bit earlier when we talked about young stars is Aatu Räty, and I know he had a big finish in Abbotsford last year. Does that translate? Like, I think some people forget, like, he doesn't turn 22 until the middle of November. Feels like he's been on the hockey radar forever because he was such a highly touted prospect ahead of his draft. And people know the story. There's been a little bit of slippage, obviously, and then part of the Horvat trade. He's still only 21. So there is still some room for growth and some time on his side here. But I'm really curious to see, what kind of camp. Not just I would expect him to show out in Penticton, but more about main camp for a guy that, has played NHL games. Like, what does Aatu Räty do, and how quickly can he push for a job I don't expect him to make the team out of camp, but I do think at some point this year, it's important that he continues to develop that, when they put a call into the farm, that he is right there at the top of the list of the guys that they take a serious look at.
Can you move yourself up the depth chart? Can you move past Nils Aman on the depth chart for centers, right? So it's an interesting conversation.
And also, where do they see Räty, right? Like,
exactly.
He finished as a winger and had success as a winger. Foot speed has always been a little bit of an issue, but I'm curious to see, where do the Vancouver Canucks view Aatu Räty, and I think we'll get a better, probably starting in Penticton, get a better sense of where the organization has him slotted as far as moving forward here as a player.
Not to mention they really like Max Sasson as well, right? Like, that's a guy we've heard the organization talk about. So again, it's crowded,
and they don't have a lot of depth at center. That's just if he was a right shot guy, how far would that go to help his cause? Because it looks like they're going to start with, if Amon makes the team as 13th forward, 5 left-handed centers. And, some would say, hey, how big a deal is that? Obviously. But you saw how much Rick Tocchet leaned on Elias Lindholm. Now, part of that was Lindholm was an ace, whether he was a righty or a lefty. He just was a really good face-off guy. It happened that he was a right shot. But again, you wouldn't construct a baseball pitching staff of all right-handers. This is the pros. You don't want to leave any stone unturned. And we saw this a couple of years ago when Bruce Boudreau was here. Nothing but left-handed centers. It sort of feels wild to me that time has lapsed and it's really not something that this organization has addressed through free agency or trade, even in the draft. I just think, it makes sense to have at least one right shot face-off guy in your arsenal. Otherwise, you're asking a lot of guys on their weak side to try to win face-offs against the best players in the world on the other side, some of whom are face-off aces.
Manny Malhotra, get him to work. Get him to work with the guys. Get him out there.
Well, I'm sure he'll work with the guys in Abbotsford. I know when he was hired and I saw people bring him into Vancouver for one day a week. That's not how it works. Coaching in the American Hockey League is a full-time job. He'll have enough work on his plate in Abbotsford. He's not taking a day a week to drive into Vancouver to help the big league Canucks with faceoffs. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, not quite. Okay, with training camp, Jeff, I'm just trying to go through all our notes here that we have. There's a couple news and notes. Do you want to get to that on Demko,
Sure.
Boeser? Anything else that comes up, just feel free to speak. This is Canucks Convo. We have conversations on this show. It's been hard to get any real update on Thatcher Demko. There's been a lot of vagueness going on. And I'm just tired of trying to decipher it. Let's just say it looks like Thatcher Demko is not going to be in training camp. Doesn't look like he's going to be at the preseason. And there's a lot of doubt that he will be ready for the start of the regular season. This is just what we've seen out there. We don't know any of this because we haven't seen Thatcher Demko on the ice. We haven't gotten any official update. We'll probably get that, I would assume, next week, the day before training camp, when Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin speak in Penticton. You would assume we get some sort of update on Demko after physicals have taken place, but we'll see. I'm not holding my breath here. We'll see if we get any real update on Thatcher Demko, but right now it's safe to say that the Canucks starting goaltender will not be at training camp next week.
Yeah, I didn't see him out at the Jake yesterday. It was suggested to me that he may have been in Philadelphia for the Johnny Gaudreau funeral. I don't know that either, but he was a teammate of Johnny's at Boston College. In fact, he was a teammate of Matthews as well. So it would make sense if that's where he was. I didn't see Thatcher Demko, saw most of the others at the golf tournament. But look, I've been at this a while, Dave. I can't recall an instance a week ahead of training camp, and really it's been the month before training camp, where there has been so much uncertainty from the hockey club, from insiders. Nobody seems to be able to pinpoint exactly where Thatcher Demko is in his health and his readiness. But I'm with you. I think he'll be in Penticton, but probably just to continue with treatment. We'll see if he's on the ice at all, even if it means going out early before groups but I'm not expecting him to be an active participant. I've heard things about him, being out till the middle of October. Some have said later than that. I know that Elliot Friedman earlier in the week said it's not something that they're not looking at half a season here. But to me, the bigger question now with Thatcher Demko is this is year after year after year where injuries have become part of his story, whether he likes it or not. And I know he doesn't want to be painted as a guy that's injury prone. So I won't use that phrase, but he couldn't deny that injuries have been a part of his story here for the last bunch of years. Does he have a body that just betrays him and isn't up to the rigors of that position? And this has nothing to do with we've heard repeatedly. Jim Rutherford keeps talking about nobody works harder, nobody trains harder. They have to dial this guy back. But in saying all of that, it's a tough position physically, and maybe his body just isn't built to withstand the rigors year after year after year. So when he's on, he's as good as just about anybody in the NHL. We saw that. Last year, the first 6 weeks of the season, the Canucks' quick start, a lot of that was on the back of Thatcher Demko. He finished second in Vezina balloting. You don't fluke into that. And when he's on, like, he's a joy to watch. And I hope that he can regain full health. And I want to see this guy perform in the playoffs. We got one game last year, and then he left. And that's really the last anybody has seen of Thatcher Demko on the ice. So, yeah, the uncertainty. And then you couple that with the Ian Clark news. Like, goaltending can derail an awful lot of like really good planning for an organization. And I'm not suggesting that's going to happen, but the Canucks can check off all the boxes they want about addressing winger depth and rounding out their defense core and everything else. But if you don't have your Vezina runner-up and all-star goaltender, that makes life a whole lot difficult. Ask Bruce Boudreau how, life was when Thatcher Demko went down and Spencer Martin and Colin Delia were forced to play way more than anybody wanted to see them. So, just so much uncertainty there. And then obviously with Artur Silovs and the Latvian thing and the Olympic qualifier. So it's just, one story on top of another. I was glad to see Silovs in town and out on the ice at UBC. I think he's going to be fine for main camp. But, the update that we might get on Thatcher Demko may come in the form of the Canucks adding another goaltender to their training camp roster ahead of hitting the ice in Penticton. And if they do, I think that's going to tell us a fair bit about the hopes and expectations of having Thatcher Demko around anytime soon.
Kevin Lankinen, he's still unsigned. Like, Kevin Lankinen still hasn't accepted an offer. Dollywall reported that the Canucks made him an offer that was too far below. Will the Canucks come back? Will Lankinen come back? We're getting close. Like, we're getting really close.
I don't know what kind of other offers, like a week before training camp start. Like, Kevin Lankinen's got to be careful. Like, this is a game of musical chairs and the music's about to end. Even if the Canucks are lowballing for a year, if you get the security of an NHL contract, like, I don't, maybe I'm misreading the situation. Maybe there are other suitors kicking tires, but teams are starting to, finalize their rosters here. And that's why a guy like Antti Raanta on a PTO made a little bit of sense, only because it's short term. There's no commitment from the hockey club. It's come and prove that you can still do it. He's got familiarity with Rick Tocchet he had a couple of good years under Tocchet in Arizona. But boy, the games that he played in Carolina last year, 873 save percentage, played games in the American Hockey League and had a similar save percentage. He's 35. I'm not sure that Antti Raanta is the answer, but he might be the answer to get you through a training camp and some preseason games if Thatcher Demko is going to be ready by, the middle to late October. So as every day goes by here, I kind of wake up thinking, are we going to see an addition to the Canucks training camp roster in the form of some sort of goaltender that isn't on that roster right now?
Okay, moving up the ice. Brock Boeser spoke yesterday. You spoke to Brock Boeser at the Jake Milford tournament yesterday. Brock Boeser said that he is free of that blood clot. He's still got to pay attention to it. Can't fall asleep on the plane is what he said. He's going to wear some compression pads as well. He's going to have different things to kind of monitor him, but he's off the blood thinners. He said he's been able to practice fully with contact, all that sort of stuff. And then he got off the blood thinners earlier in the summer as well. So it's good news for Brock Boeser, who again missed Game 7 of the Canucks second round series against the Edmonton Oilers with that blood clotting, which again, that could have been a really bad injury. It could be life-threatening sometimes with blood clotting. Boeser was lucky that it wasn't that for him. They caught it early, it seems like, and he is 100% and ready to go for training camp.
Yeah, seemed to be in pretty good spirits. So was one of the first guys to meet the media yesterday. And, it was a small group that came out and stood in front of microphones, but he was one of them. And he was one of the guys that I hoped that we were going to hear from because of all that uncertainty about his summer months. And we know last year that he stepped away from the Beauty League in Minnesota and wanted to focus on his training, and the proof's in the pudding. The guy has a 40-goal season. He got off to that incredible start. At Christmas time, only Austin Matthews had more goals in the National Hockey League than Brock Boeser. So the first half was off the charts, and it started with that 4-goal night against Edmonton and sort of set the tone. We know that he's a guy that scores in bunches. Did it last year. He had the 4-goal night and a couple of hat tricks. But he talked about having a good training, summer training. He's here. He's been out at UBC the last couple of days. And so, he'll be ready to go when camp gets here. And he talked about, just trying to get off to another good start and let things take care of themselves because it is a contract year. And that was one of the questions I put to him yesterday. Well, look, his contract has been front and center for various reasons for the last couple of years. They couldn't give him away at one point, and then he becomes a 40-goal scorer and looks invaluable to this hockey club. But the management group has said, we're in no rush here. And I was a little surprised to hear Boeser when I asked about the contract, and And he said he was willing just to kind of let things play out. But he also said, I've got a lot to prove after the blood clot. So thought that was interesting that, even at that, he recognizes that, while he may have a clean bill of health here and the green light to take part in full contact and everything else, that, there are going to be people on the contract side, at least, that are watching closely to make sure that a guy who had injury issues earlier in his career, but has been pretty durable the last couple of seasons. He played 81 games last year. The only game he missed was game 82 in Winnipeg, and then game 7, obviously, against the Edmonton Oilers. So, I laughed when, somebody asked him how his summer was, and he just said a bunch of weddings. He's in that age range now, late 20s, where a bunch of his buddies, I suppose, are walking down the aisle. So his summer was filled going to weddings, and now we'll see if he's ready to go to the net and do all the good things that he did last year. And that was one of the things that, he routed out his game last year by getting to the net, staying at the net front, paying a price, screens and tips and deflections and rebounds and all that kind of stuff. We used to think of him as a guy that scored from distance, but boy, he really has kind of rounded out his arsenal. And it's going to be fascinating to see if he has another quick start. The meter goes up from the management perspective, but it's a business. Brock's been around a while. He watched Bo Horvat get squeezed out of here a couple of seasons ago. This is going to be a fascinating storyline to watch all season long. Where does he fit? What kind of commitment is this organization prepared to make to Brock Boeser? And ultimately, is Brock Boeser going to be a Vancouver Canuck long-term?
Someone in the chat that wants to see him traded. Getting out in front of it. Don't pay him into his I'm not making fun of the commenter either. I'm not coming here and saying trade Brock Boeser, but he's looking forward and he's saying, before we have to pay him $8 million into his 30s, what does that next contract look like? And I think there's no sense answering it right now today, because it depends entirely on what happens this season. This is something that Jim Rutherford alluded to in the offseason, was that they basically want to see Brock Boeser do it again. And if this is who he is, if this is a guy that can score 40 goals and he's just figured it out, he's made the adjustments to his game. Like, let's be honest, he was a different player last year, not just because of the goal totals, but how he was getting those goals. If this is just who he is, they'll be happy to pay him to have a 40 goal scorer in Vancouver for years to come. But is that what he is? And I guess that's the answer that we're going to get.
I'm having trouble, and there's probably examples out there, but off the top of my head, if this team is competitive, if this team has a similar season to last year and Boeser is having a fine season, I just can't think of examples of a contending team offloading a 35 or 40 goal scorer ahead of the trade deadline, when that's exactly the kind of piece that team would need to make some noise in the playoffs. So
there's no swap there. There's just no swap. That's going to make sense, right? You're either a buyer or a seller. Or you're not a buyer, right? Or both. You're figuring out what you are. And if you're a buyer, you're going to a seller. It's just, that's how the trade market works. So yeah, like,
I mean, we saw it with a guy like Sam Reinhart, though. Sam Reinhart had an incredible season and was willing to play out his contract, and ultimately the two sides got together. So, I mean, there are examples of that, and maybe that's the path that Brock Boeser is just going to have to be prepared to go down, is play out his contract and see where it goes.
All right, let's get to anyone else, Jeff. Did you have anything else you want to say on training camp before we move on?
I'm excited. Let's go. I mean, can't make it happen sooner than it does, but no, I think it's going to be interesting. The day before training camp next Wednesday, we're expecting to hear from Rutherford and Alvin and Rick Tocchet. And last year they did it in Vancouver before going to Victoria, and it was a pretty meaty news. I mean, there's always a lot of topics to get to, and we haven't heard from Jim Rutherford or Patrick Alvin for a while. Quotes in press releases, but things around the goaltending department and the goaltending situation. Haven't heard from Alvin since the Vasily Podkolzin trade, Sammy Blais on a PTO. There's just a lot of ground to cover anytime upper management's made available. So I think that probably will yield some answers to a lot of questions that the prying eyes of the media will have for the Canucks brass.
And we'll be there. Going to have coverage all week long next week over at CanucksArmy.com and here on Canucks Conversation. Let's get to anyone else, though, which is brought to you by our friends over at the Vancouver Canadians. Today and tomorrow at the Nat, the Canadians are hosting games 1 and 2 in the Northwest League Championship Series. The Seas are taking on the Spokane Indians in a best-of-5 series for the title. Games 3 to 5 would be on the road. Check out some playoff baseball tonight and tomorrow. First pitch at 7:05 p.m. Don't wait. Call 604-872-5232 or go to CanadiansBaseball.com. Spokane in town. How far is the drive to Spokane from here?
Ever been to Spokane?
No, have I driven through it? I don't know. I've been to Seattle.
It's on the other side of the state entirely. It's on the Idaho border. It's nowhere close to Seattle. It would be 5 hours from Seattle. It's probably 7 or 8 hours from here. I know it was 8 hours from Kamloops because when I did games in the Western Hockey League, it was an 8-hour bus ride. Spokane and Tri-Cities, usually it was they're pretty close together down there in southeastern Washington State. And so kind of 1-2 stop. Now Wenatchee's in the Western Hockey League, so maybe that breaks up some of the travel. But no, Spokane is it's a lovely little city. It's one of those cities that kind of punches above its weight. It feels like a bigger city than it is. I always enjoyed my time in Spokane, and they had a terrific brand new arena that opened up. It's probably 20 years old now, maybe older than that, but at the time it was like state of the art. It was incredible. I remember they hosted the Memorial Cup that Manny Malhotra and Roberto Luongo both appeared in as junior players. I'm dating myself way back when, but those are my memories of Spokane.
I'm looking at Spokane. It looks like a nice city. Like when you say punches above its weight, I totally get what you're saying.
River runs through it. Gonzaga University. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. I gotta head on down to Spokane. Maybe I'll go catch games 3 and 4. 3 and 4.
Go for game 5 if it goes the distance.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I forgot they would host that too. Okay, so yeah, Vancouver Canadians, check them out. That's who our presenting sponsor of Anyone Else is. Okay, Jeff, I had a few things that I wanted to bring, and I know you do as well. There were a few things that I wanted to bring up. Nick Robertson signed with the Toronto Maple Leafs today, and of course, people hate it when we talk about the Leafs, but I did want to bring it up. It's expected, and Frank Saravalli reported this, our pal over at Daily Faceoff. He reported that Nick Robertson is still expected to be traded, and that having a contract just makes it easier to trade him. So that's why they came to an agreement. I'm not going to sit here and do the classic, well, should the Canucks take a look at him? But like Nick Robertson, another guy, kind of like a Nils Höglander, Daniel Sprong, where we're talking about a guy who can score in very limited minutes.
Yeah. And I guess I get where Frank's coming from. I mean, you make this trade demand, but you're without a deal. I think other teams would say, like, well, if you can't come to terms, like, is it going to be any easier for us to come to terms if we make the trade and give up assets? So, yes, it would feel like it would facilitate a trade if at least you get the contract done. If I'm Nick Robertson, you better show up, like, back up your words now, like, play hard, make it so that other teams want you. Rather than just going through the summer months and kind of running your mouth and demanding a trade. So kind of curious to see where that one goes. But, he still needs to show a fair bit before I would think NHL teams would really, really get on the Nick Robertson train.
Yeah,
he's not his brother.
No, he's not his brother. I'm curious how this one ends. So I just wanted to bring it up because it's just a situation that I kind of have one eye on. Okay, there were a lot that happened. We were both away at the same time. You were in Europe. I was in Soyuz, often referred to as the Europe of British Columbia. You had a Europe story that you wanted to tell on the show?
I did. Well, it was funny because we back-ended our family vacation the last 2 weeks of August, and part of that was we just had some things going earlier in the summer that this was the 2 weeks that worked, and I kind of thought, all right, like final 2 weeks of August, hockey world really kind of grinds to a halt. I'm going to be on the other side of the world. No big deal. I swear to you that I was on the runway from YVR. We were on a flight to Dublin. I can't even remember if I'd put my phone in airplane mode. And I get a notification. And it's like just one of the ones that pops up on your phone. And it said, Vancouver Canucks trade former first rounder Vasily Podkolzin. That's all it said. Like it didn't finish. And I'm furiously clicking on it, but I'm not online at that point. We're starting to fly. And I was like, I'm not going to sit on a 9-hour flight and not know where the Canucks have sent them and what they got in return. And so I had to wait till we got to cruising altitude. I'm cheap, but I bucked up for the airplane Wi-Fi. And talk about a letdown. Like when I finally connect and I find out that they got a fourth round pick and they sent him to Edmonton, I was like, I paid more for the airplane Wi-Fi than the Oilers did for Vasily Podkolzin. Anyways, so that was that. And then I had an hour of like web surfing time at 37,000 feet. But then the Ian Clark news came out when I can't remember where I was. But then Sammy Blais and a PTO. And I was like, man, like I'm too far from home. There's too much going on here with the Vancouver Canucks. So may have to alter the travel plans next year, bump them up a little bit to the middle of the summer months so that I'm closer to home. But, hockey, like it's a huge part, obviously, of what we do for a living. It's never far from my mind. And after we went to Dublin, we went to Berlin. And the Berlin Eisenbären, the polar bears, the ice bears, their team in the DEL, they won the DEL last year. I wanted to get a Berlin Ice Barons t-shirt because I don't know if you've seen the logo, but get Jacob to put the logo up first.
Yes.
Look at the logo. Like that's a mean looking polar bear.
That's a sweet logo.
And I wanted to get the shirt. So on one of our outings, we went and there's a team store and you can see it there. And, it's not as big as the Canucks team store, but team store. And I don't know if you look really closely, you can see like there's a pink thing right in the middle of the screen. It's a Warrior glove chair.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's a hockey glove, but it's a chair and it's super comfortable. Like I've never seen one before, but I kind of want one now. Anyways, the Ice Bear in Berlin, they've got a team store and they sell merch. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to get a t-shirt. I've got an elephant shirt. I want a Ice Baron shirt. So we go in there and there's a young guy that's working by himself. And I say to him, do you speak English? And he says, yeah. And I thought, okay, this is good. And then he says, where are you from? I said, Vancouver, Canada. And I see you've got like a Ty Ronning jersey because Ty Ronning played for the Ice Baron last year. And I was like, he's from Vancouver. And then like behind the cashier, they've sort of got this Ice Baron wall of fame. And one of the giant faces is Dennis Peterson. Do you remember Dennis Peterson as a Vancouver Canuck?
No.
So he was the other guy along with Brendan Morrison in the Alexander McGillney trade. Like we're going back 24 years.
Yeah.
But Dennis Peterson played in the Western Hockey League, big, strong defensive center who became a star after his NHL days. He went over, he played like 5 or 6 years with the Ice Baron. And I looked at him up on Hockey DB. Like he put up big numbers. He's sort of on the wall of fame in this souvenir store. So the guy says, I say, oh, Ty Ronning's from Vancouver. And yeah, Dennis Peterson. And then this guy drops I lived in Burnaby last year. I was like, what? You lived in Burnaby? Like Metrotown, up high. Like Metrotown or Brentwood, which is your, like, do you know Quadrelli? I should have asked him that.
Yeah.
I was like, you lived in Burnaby? And he was like, yeah, I went to Canuck games. And anyways, it was not the answer I was expecting from the young guy working behind the till at the Ice Baron souvenir store. But apparently he spent some of his time in Burnaby last year. But so anyways, long story. I didn't get my polar bear shirt because they had the worst inventory of sizing. They had smalls or like 4XL and nothing in the middle. And like their season's about to start. I think they were playing exhibition games just as we were leaving. Like, how can you have a souvenir store that stocks smalls and 4XLs and nothing in between? And my wife and my kids were like, just buy something. Like, you come all this way, just buy a hat, buy it. What? No, I want a t-shirt with the bear. And I couldn't get it. So
you didn't get anything? You didn't take your family's advice?
Left empty-handed other than sitting in the Warrior hockey glove chair. That's my lasting memory from the Ice Baron souvenir store. But nice guy working behind the till, but nothing in the back. I asked, do you have other sizes back there? No. So would never happen in Burnaby, but
never
happened in Berlin.
No, yeah. Scoff's Hockey Shop would never. Dennis Peterson, 4 championships with the Berlin Polar Bears.
Legend.
Legend status. No wonder he's on the wall of fame. Oh my god.
And he huge numbers with Prince Albert in the Western Hockey League, but he very much was like a big bodied, defensive, penalty killing kind of shutdown guy. But foot speed was always an issue there, but not in the DEL. He rose to superstardom there and led the Ice Baron to 4 championships?
Yeah, 4 championships. Yeah. Wild. Back to back, then a year where they didn't win the championship, and then back to back again for 2 years. They took 1 year off winning the championship, and I'm sure if we look, they lost in the final.
Ice Baron play in the brand new Uber Arena. Like it's sponsored by Uber, and it like just opened I think WWE had a show there in late August, but beautiful. It looks like an NHL building from the outside.
Whoa.
I didn't get inside, but the Uber Arena, home
It
of the
looks
Ice
like
Baron.
it looks like the Staples Center. Like I just clicked it. Like it's a beautiful, beautiful rink. Definitely nicer than the one we have out here. That's wow. That's beautiful. Unbelievable. Seats have cup holders. Okay, let's move on. Let's go to the chat here. We've got a few things in here that I wanted to get. This one from Mad Strafe. It was earlier, and it was, what does the Karamaki need to show in training camp for him to somehow make the NHL club? Jeff, I feel like I've said this so many times, and I've talked about it so many times. I would like to see Jonathan Karamaki just start training camp on Elias Pettersson's wing. Like you said, you don't need to have your lines that early. Just put him there in training camp. Linus Karlsson got looks with Elias Pettersson at training camp. Give Jonathan Karamaki that shot. Let him get some reps with Elias Pettersson just to see what's there. It's not a boom or bust. If this doesn't work out, we all have to talk about it and freak out about it. Just see what's there. Just see what's there with Karamaki playing next to one of your best centers. See what's there. And
I
then
want to see, like, his biggest weapon, it seems, is curving off the sideboards into space and then letting that shot go. That's great on big ice where there is additional space. We're talking about the best league in the world here. I'm kind of curious to see, can that sort of thing translate to the smaller dimensions of a North American rink against guys that have been doing this for a while. Now, kind of like Elias Pettersson and Nils Höglander, he's played pro hockey. I think you have to remember that he's not coming in, right out of his draft year as a junior. He has played professional hockey. So the adjustment might not be as great in that regard, but the dimensions of the rink, I think, will, even a split second less to get a shot away is significant at the NHL level. So, if he has time, my sense is that shot's going to translate. But what does it look like in traffic? What does he look like? Just the physical rigors of life in the National Hockey League. So I think those are some of the things that I'm going to be looking for at training camp as much as I am, he's got time and space. What does that shot look like? That shot is going to look great if he has time and space, but will he have those opportunities?
Yeah, it's the question. It's the question I'm asking is how's he going to be deployed at training camp? I say put him with Elias Pettersson, see what you got. But again, to make it with the NHL club, you have to get that opportunity, and then you have to make it such an undeniable no-brainer to keep you there. And again, that's where the real challenge would come in for actually making the roster, which is why it's just not likely that he will make the roster. Okay, this one from Adam Voth. Are there any options left for quality defensemen that's an upgrade from what they have? Maybe a puck mover? At this stage, I don't think so. Like I was scouring, like Tyson Barrie just signed a PTO in Calgary. Jared Tenorti signed in Calgary a two-way deal. Do either of those guys, are either of them an upgrade on what the Canucks have? No, I don't think so. And there's no one better than them out there. So I think the simple answer is just no. Maybe you get someone on waiver wires that you really like. But again, are they going to be an upgrade that you can actually put on your NHL roster? Look, you're trying to upgrade on Noah Juleson, right? Like you're not going to find an upgrade to play in your actual defense on your defense pairings. You're probably not going to find that upgrade at this juncture. I just wouldn't think, unless they go out and make a trade where it's quality for quality. There's just not going to be anybody that's just free for the taking to go out and sign or pick up on waivers. Okay, Jeff, I want to get your opinion on this one. This one from Vin XD. History has always pinned Edmonton and Vancouver as rivals, but I felt that it hasn't been like that really in a while until this playoff run. What's the general vibe for this year, moving into this year? And this person said that they live in Edmonton as a disclaimer, but they are a Canucks fan in Edmonton. I would say heading into this year that the Oilers are the Canucks' biggest rival.
Without a doubt. I mean, playoffs breed rivalries, and to go 7 games and have the drama that that series did. And I mean, look, the Oilers got to game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. The Canucks want to build on getting to game 7 of the second round. Is the hostility going to be there on night 1 of Young Stars when the two organizations kick off their season? Probably won't feel it there in Penticton, but once the season gets going, it's a little unfortunate that last year the Canucks played the Oilers 4 times in the regular season. It's only 1 game, but this is a 3-year regular season between those teams, so 1 less viewing maybe for the Canucks. Now, I know they have the Oilers number in the regular season, but maybe it's a good thing that you don't have to face McDavid and Draisaitl 1 additional time. whatever the case, yeah, the Oilers have shot to the top of the power rankings of Canuck rivals, and I don't think it's particularly close. Who's second? Calgary's always the default, but where the Flames are in their competitive arc, and too much time has lapsed now with Chicago and Los Angeles and some of those. Boston will always be there, I suppose, but not at the level. It's the Oilers, and I think the first time these teams meet in the regular season, it's going to be apparent. You're going to feel it. So that's good. It's always good to have a running rivalry. Hopefully someday the Seattle rivalry gets there. But again, I think those teams are going to have to meet in the playoffs before you truly feel what we would consider an NHL rivalry.
I was going to say probably Toronto is number 2, but that's more between the fan bases.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excuse me. The Boston one is interesting because now you've got the element of Zadorov and Lindholm in Boston, notably Zadorov. Like, let's be honest, Zadorov's going to have some quote right, not bad mouthing, but he'll have some quote right before the game that makes headlines, and it's going to reignite that rivalry. Like, that's my prediction for the years. Nikita Zadorov gives a soundbite and reignites the rivalry in some way.
Vinny Desharnais is willing to drop bombs on JT Miller at the golf tournament. Like, absolutely. I would expect that Nikita Zadorov, and it wouldn't surprise me if he had something to say about Miller or Quinn Hughes. Like, he knows what he's doing and what he's saying, and it wouldn't surprise me. The Canucks and the Boston play each other twice in a 2-week span, late November and mid-December. So those are the 2 looks, and DeBrusk and Heinen, obviously. There's enough crossover that those games will hold some
Forbert.
For a lot of those players.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna go with that as my number 2 on my power rankings of Canucks rivals for this season. Heading into this season, there was this video. I'm not sure if you saw it. We can't find it, but I thought I saw it on the Canucks Twitter account of Archer Shilov's golf swing. Did you happen to see this, Jeff?
I didn't. I saw him driving around in a golf cart, the mustache in midseason form, the big glass. Like, he didn't look like an NHL goalie to me. I don't know what I think an NHL goalie looks like on a golf course, but he looked like he should be in a lab somewhere cooking up some sort of, chemical compound, like legally, of course. But like, he looked like a mad scientist more than that's what I was trying to say. But I didn't see the golf swing. So
it's bad. It's bad. Like, you and I have never golfed together, but
we haven't. We were supposed to, and then Phil Hronik signed with the Canucks and derailed. We had a big golf outing planned that afternoon.
Right. I was supposed to be with you guys.
Never
that
took
day
the
too.
rain check. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah,
all 3 of us were supposed to go.
Yeah, and then Faber was going to be our 4th. Of course, he still went. He doesn't have to work ever. But yeah, Hronik signed and Faber didn't have to work, but we did. So we weren't able to make it, unfortunately. But yeah, I forgot. What I was getting at though, Jeff, is that my golf swing isn't very good. To say the least. But anyways,
there were a couple of, who was it yesterday that was claiming he wasn't much of like, most of these guys play, and some of them play at a pretty high level, and some of them have good looking swings. I saw JT Miller, and we know that a lot was made of JT Miller trying to qualify for the US Open a year ago. Boeser plays a fair bit. I think Demko, when he's around and he's healthy, he plays. But there was somebody that copped to not being much of a golfer. I'm always interested to see who are the lefties and who are the righties, and the fact that like right-handed hockey players play golf left-handed. Like, there's some weird stuff there. My mind is still blown that Daniel and Henrik aren't identical twins, that one's left-handed and one's right-handed, like that kind of stuff. So that's what I look for when they post these videos. And it was funny because I was out there yesterday and I saw Elias Pettersson. We didn't get a chance to talk to him. I didn't see Rick Tocchet, and I wondered, like, was Tocchet even there? But I've seen some pictures on the Canucks social that yes, the coach was there as part of the Jake yesterday.
All right. Anything else that we have to get to? Anyone else? I think we're ready to wrap up, right? Do you have anything on your mind, Jeff? Final thoughts?
I spent a year in Burnaby. No, all good. We covered a lot of ground. I think people hopefully are an hour wiser and that much closer to training camp. It's getting here, and it's going to be fun. We wait all off season for. We talk about things all off season, but now we finally get a chance to see what the coaching staff is thinking about deployment and depth chart and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, looking forward to covering it all here on Convo and also at Canucks Army.
So we're rooming together, right? We've got our content house that we're going to have in Penticton. Maybe we got to throw out some bonus content, a little Family Feud. I'm not sure. We'll see, because we're playing Family Feud on Thursday, and theoretically we would then play next Thursday as well, when you, me, and Harmon.
Well, I heard the throwdown last week about Convo against Rinkwide, and that got the wheels churning in my mind here. So
yeah, Is okay. We'll talk off air because I think we might be able to pull that off pretty shortly here. But you're gonna like this, Jeff. You're gonna like my Bet365 bet of the day because I went on our website, our pals over there, Bet365. Went on their website and I was looking for my bet of the day, and I saw D. Peterson pitching for the spelled differently,
Yeah,
for
work with
the
it. Yeah.
New York Mets. Okay, he's pitching today. His name's David Peterson, not Dennis Peterson, but I just like it. It's topical.
They call him DPD, so it works, right?
Yeah, they call him DPD. We call him DPD. We're big DPD guys on this show. We're taking his strikeout total today. Take him. I don't know why to get 5 strikeouts at -140 odds.
They're playing the Jays, right?
They are playing the Jays,
Yeah.
so
Take the
strikeouts
over.
happen. Take the over on the strikeouts there. That's our bet. That's our bet of the day, brought to you by Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code VANBONUS when you sign up for an account. It must be 90 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. Whatever that looks like to you, you decide. Maybe don't just look at names and say, I'm taking the over on this guy. Maybe bet a little more responsibly than that. But go check out our friends over at Bet365. Jeff, this was fun. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Final thoughts. I always ask you this. Final thoughts for you.
Go Canadians. Get
Go
leg
Canadians.
up on that best of 5. Take advantage of the Nat and go Ice Barons. I think their season's about to start over there. So we're going to be following from afar. We're going to be following the Berlin Ice Baron.
We've got our first prediction for the Convo versus Rink-Wide Family Feud game. J-Pat cleans up, leaves quads in the dust. I haven't been great at this game. I'm not going to lie. At the Fast Money segment, Harmon's been cleaning up. We had a final tally of the points that each of us have logged. Harmon is wiping the floor with me so far. And the segment was my idea, but anyways.
Well, I think the very first one, though, he logged like 310 points when he only needed 200.
Oh, I made it really easy on them, and people in the comments have been telling me it's too hard now, so I can't win, I guess. But
we're gonna find the happy medium. We
That's
are gonna
sweet
find the
spot,
happy medium. Yeah. But we'll close it out there for my co-host Jeff Paterson, our technical producer Jacob Lazar. We'll be back on Thursday, folks, with Harmon joining me once again. My name is Dave Quadrelli. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canucks Conversation.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.